Today, we're going to be learning about the category of otherwise health impaired, or OHI, specifically talking about ADHD and PTSD. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or ADHD, is defined as a chronic disorder that includes attention difficulty, hyperactivity, and impulsiveness. About 8.5% of children are diagnosed with ADHD, so it's a pretty common disorder. It is important to note that just because a child is diagnosed with ADHD does not automatically qualify them for a 504 plan or an IEP. This is a quick video from BuzzFeed that kind of gives us insight of what it feels like to have ADHD. And I apologize if there's an ad first.
Captain Marvel.
There's a different reality leading into ours.
They're here. The Marvels. Get tickets now.
I think with ADHD, the problem is that you sort of
I'm going to try to rephrase this because I'm sort of going on a tangent.
What just happened?
what was I saying? I misbehaved a lot as a kid, but I didn't mean to.
The natural environment of a classroom is very non-conducive to somebody with ADHD. You know, just like this quiet room, you're sitting at this table, a bunch of other kids are all doing their work. It was almost like it's sensory overload, like everything is coming at you all at once.
I would be trying to focus on this teacher, and then all of a sudden I would snap to it again, and I had missed half of what the teacher had talked about. It was like you're high or something. It's kind of similar to being high.
One of the side effects of ADHD is a sort of an inability or at least a tough time staying still, concentrating, focusing on day-to-day tasks.
I feel like my thoughts are sort of on like a carousel in my brain, and it's going in circles, and each thought stops for 2 seconds in front of my eyes. I can barely grasp it, and then it's gone.
The third day I was at BuzzFeed, I was taking some safety test with my friend, fellow producer here, Caitlin, and I'm already lost on the packet. I look over and Caitlin's answered the first 10 questions already. And it's just that's the story of my life is looking over to my friend and being like, how the hell did you just do that?
I have been on some form of medication ever since I was 13.
I stopped taking medication for me because I just didn't like the way it made me feel. They curbed my appetite, I was losing weight.
But the medication provides me with clarity.
When I'm not on my medicine, it feels like the smallest tasks are really overwhelming because I can't visualize and focus on the simple process.
I have to plan things out, I have to write everything down or else I forget. I don't advocate that everyone go off their meds if they don't need to. For me, that was something that I felt I wanted to do.
It looks different in everybody. I would just wish people were a little more sensitive with the verbal assumptions they make.
I just wish people believed it was real. My ADHD is the realest thing in my life. I can't reach out and touch it, but I can feel it.
So that is a great example. They have multiple people give their examples of what it feels like. Some of the symptoms that children with ADHD express, there are 3 different types, predominantly inattentive presentation. This is the side that has a hard time paying attention to close detail. They make careless mistakes, have problems staying focused, does not seem to be able to listen very well. They have a hard time following through instructions. They avoid tasks that take a lot of mental effort. They often lose things and misplace them. They're easily distracted. They forget daily tasks. And so that's the inattentive side. The other side, the hyperactive or the impulsive presentation of ADHD, these are the kids that have a hard time sitting still. They often fidget or play with their hands or their face. They're not able to stay seated for a long time. They run or climb on things when inappropriate. They're unable to play or do leisure activities quietly. They constantly seem to be on the go. These are the kids that usually talk too much or blurt out answers. They have a difficulty in waiting in line. Sometimes they interrupt others or intrudes on what they're doing, and they don't recognize what is appropriate or inappropriate in those situations. And then the last type of ADHD is a combined presentation. So that's both the inattentive and the hyperactivity or the impulsive side. It is important to note that several conditions can mimic ADHD symptoms, like mood disorders or substance use, or even some medications. So it is important to actually be diagnosed by a professional. Now moving on to post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD. It is a psychiatric disorder that may occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event, series of events, or certain set of circumstances. While traumatic experiences are common, PTSD is different. I found some statistics that say 15 to 43% of girls and around 14 to 43% of boys, so very similar percent, will go through some traumatic event in their childhood. But of that small 15% of those children, only 3 to 15% of girls, or even 1% to 6% of boys will actually develop PTSD. So it is a very small percentage. And just because a child has a traumatic experience doesn't necessarily mean that they have PTSD. It's also important to note that some risk factors can raise the chance that the child will develop PTSD. Some of these factors are how severe the trauma is, how the parents react to the trauma, and how close or far away the child is from the trauma. And here is another video, a little bit about PTSD in teens.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
And
We've
children.
all heard, I think now, of PTSD, right? And we throw this thing around like it's kind of a joke. I had a really rough test. I'm going to have PTSD. Oh, that was a horrible breakup. I have PTSD from this person. But we have to remember that post-traumatic stress disorder is a really significant psychological problem. We used to think it only affected soldiers returning from war who were horrendously traumatized. But we now know that any really significant traumatic event or series of events can lead to PTSD, even in young children. So what are we talking about? It could be domestic violence, where mom and dad are fighting and the child witnesses that. It could be being in a car crash or having your house broken into, or even being chronically bullied over time or sexually assaulted. All of these really frightening, really awful events leave an imprint on our brains, and our brains respond by becoming hypervigilant and hyper-worried and trying to replay the event or being ready to respond at any trigger with violence of our own or with panic of our own. And this can become distracting. It can interrupt sleep. It can keep people from eating. It can keep them from socializing normally. They may even replay the event, if they're young children, by playing something like car crash or fire, or even worse, sexual assault. If you feel like you have the symptoms of real PTSD, or you have a friend who you think needs help, talk to someone, because there is amazing help. We now have what's called trauma-informed care. Therapists, even pediatricians, who are qualified to address these types of traumas without making them worse. And that's really the key, because when we talk about these things, that can bring the trauma back. And so there are ways to address this that help people find constructive ways to deal with these feelings and find better ways to feel okay.
I really liked how he said that, like, it's not affecting, sometimes people immediately think about soldiers, but there are a lot of traumatic experiences where PTSD can be developed, and obviously that's not something that's going to be common within children from being a soldier, so it's important to look out for those signs. Some of the symptoms, these are just some, obviously not limited to, but some symptoms of PTSD are being easily startled, feeling tense, on guard, or on edge, having difficulty concentrating, having difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, feeling irritable or having angry or aggressive outbursts, engaging in risky, reckless or destructive behavior. And you can see how these symptoms could get in the way of a child's ability to learn or be fully engaged in school. And so it makes sense that a child who has PTSD can benefit from having an IEP. Some criteria for eligibility for otherwise health impaired. There are 13 categories in which educational disabilities are defined, and ADHD and PTSD fall under the category of otherwise health impaired, so OHI category. And this is how they are able to be eligible. In order to receive special education and related services through an IEP, the student must be adversely affected or impacted to the level the student is incapable of performing at grade level when provided educational instruction at the grade level. Areas they may be adversely affected by a child's disability include, but are not limited to, written expression, reading fluency skills and comprehension, oral expression, basic reading skills, listening comprehension, mathematic calculation, and problem solving. So if a teacher or even a parent is seeing that their child is struggling with these and they have been diagnosed with ADHD or PTSD, these are some things that would allow them to be eligible for an IEP if testing was done and everybody on the IEP team found that they are eligible. It is also important to note that just because they have been diagnosed, like I said earlier, with ADHD or PTSD, does not make them automatically eligible for an IEP. So some specialized instructions or some modifications that a teacher can take in action for these students. There are a lot of medication and therapy. From what I was researching, that's probably one of the most helpful in both of these situations. Extra time on tests. You can understand why a child with PTSD, who's probably very anxious, could benefit from extra time, as well as a child with ADHD where they have a hard time focusing. Instruction and assignments tailored to the child. This may be less amount, or maybe it divided up throughout a few days. Seating arrangement's important. Sometimes being away from a window or away from other specific students or closer to the teacher's desk may be beneficial. Using technology to assist with tasks. Sensory breaks. This is extremely important for children with ADHD. Sometimes there's just sensory overload, or even it's underwhelming and they just need that input to help them regain focus. Displaying information in a more visible place. Children with ADHD would greatly benefit from this, having everything easily accessible. Dividing complex tasks into manageable subtasks. Positive reinforcement and feedback. Not only is positive reinforcement and feedback great for any child, but it's extremely important for a child on an IEP. They need that extra help and that extra praise to help them. Allowing breaks or times to move around. Extra help with staying organized, especially again with ADHD. That is something that they struggle with, is organization. One-on-one instruction, teaching social and emotional skills, more flexible schedules, changes to the environment. All of these could be beneficial for both children with ADHD and children with PTSD. Here are just some tips for teachers that maybe have students with ADHD or PTSD. Be involved. Try to understand what their personal needs are and how you can help them and what ways are most beneficial for them to learn. These are all things that will help them be successful. Positive reinforcement. Encourage your student. Like I said earlier, positive reinforcement and praise is extremely important. Set clear expectations. Make sure all instructors of these children are on the same page and that they have all the expectations. Having high expectations of these children is good. They need to know that they are capable. Help your students with social skills. Sometimes children with ADHD or PTSD lack a little bit in social skills, and being able to find ways to help your student develop these crucial social skills will be very beneficial. And last, communicate with the IEP team. Sometimes we all have differences of ideas, but bouncing around ideas and making sure everyone on the team is on the same page can really help this child be successful. Going back, sorry, real quick. I also was able to talk to a special education teacher here locally, and I asked her just some things that she thought maybe would be important for teachers to know that have children with ADHD or PTSD. Some of the things that she stated were practice patience, because we know teaching little ones requires a lot of patience, especially with children with a little bit of extra need. Let them move around. It's not a big deal. Don't make them just stay in one spot. They need that extra movement and that extra time. Another tip she gave me was give them something physical before mental. She gave the idea that if you know that there's a big test coming up, and she would usually have them run down to the office to go grab her something, or hey, like hurry and quickly go get a drink and then we're gonna work on this problem. Sometimes getting that physical bit out will help them really regain on their focus on their mental side. Be empathetic. These children need our empathy and they need our support and our patience. And then lastly, especially when it comes to PTSD, know when it's time to get them professional help. We are teachers, there's only so much that we know or so much we can do, and sometimes it's best to just refer them to a counselor, the school counselor, or even talk to their parents about therapy. And these are some of my sources. I will make sure to include all of these links underneath so that if you guys want to learn more or find a little bit more information about these, I'll have them so you can click in if you're making a presentation or you just kind of want to learn more about it.